Chapter 1. The least likely yes. Lora Allen nearly didn't go. She stood in front of her bathroom mirror, tugging once more at the hem of her sweater, assessing herself with the weary objectivity of a woman who had done this too many times. She didn't look bad. She didn't look remarkable either. She looked like herself, 28, tidy, quietly competent, hair pulled into a low knot that suggested effort without admitting to it. Coffee date, she reminded herself. Not a proposal, not a turning point, just caffeine and small talk. The guy's profile had been fine. Fine enough that she'd almost swiped past it. He was cute in a way that didn't demand attention. No gym selfies, no exaggerated angles, no carefully curated, effortless candids that screamed effort. His bio was brief, almost minimal. Job listed, city listed. One smiling photo in decent lighting, one candid with friends, one where he appeared to be mid-laugh and losing the battle. It was the hobby that stopped her thumb. Hobby. Saying yes to life. She'd stared at it longer than she meant to. Normally, she hated vague optimism. Felt lazy. A placeholder for depth. But something about the way he'd written it, no explanation, no inspirational quote, no emoji parade, made it feel specific. As if he wasn't trying to impress anyone. As if it was simply true. She'd matched before she could overthink it. Their messages had been pleasant. Not electric. Not dull. Just easy. He asked questions. He responded thoughtfully. He didn't overshare. He didn't disappear for days. After a few exchanges, he suggested coffee. No pressure. No flourish. So now she was here, shrugging into her coat, reminding herself that the bar for success was low. A decent conversation. No red flags. No dramatic disappointment. The cafe was warm and smelled like roasted beans and sugar. Lora scanned the room automatically, expecting the usual small panic of recognition. She spotted him near the counter before she consciously registered why. He was talking to the barista, not flirting, not performing, just talking. Hands relaxed at his sides, posture open, listening with his whole face. The barista laughed at something he said, shaking his head as he passed over a cup. Then he looked up. Their eyes met. Recognition flickered, followed by a smile that arrived without hesitation. He stepped away from the counter and crossed the room toward her, unhurried, as if he assumed she wasn't going anywhere. "Lora?" he asked, holding out his hand. She shook it. His grip was warm, confident without being firm for the sake of it. I know, he said gently, smiling. But I like hearing people say their own names. She blinked, then laughed despite herself. "Lora. I'm Daniel," he said. "I'm really glad you came." The way he said it, simply without implication, made something in her chest loosen. He gestured toward the counter. "Can I get you something? I was just going to." "Please allow me," he said, bowing his head slightly, just enough to be playful without becoming a bit. "It'll be your good deed for the day." She laughed, the sound surprising her with its ease. "All right, I won't stand in the way of charity." They ordered, and when he carried the drinks to a small table by the window, he waited until she sat before taking his own seat. Lora noticed the detail without consciously cataloging it. It wasn't something he did for her. It was just how he moved through the world. Conversation unfolded without effort. Work came first, hers in marketing analytics, his in urban planning. Friends, neighborhoods, favorite coffee orders. There were pauses, but they weren't awkward. They were breathable. At one point, she tilted her head and asked, "So what's your favorite book?" He lifted his cup, took a sip, and said calmly, "The dictionary, because all the other books are in there." She stared at him. He met her gaze, utterly composed. For 3 full seconds, she tried to process the answer. Then she snorted. The sound escaped before dignity could intervene, sharp and unladylike, followed by laughter she couldn't stop. She bent forward, covering her mouth, shoulders shaking. "Oh my God," she managed. "I thought you were serious." He grinned then, eyes crinkling. "I was very committed to the delivery." She wiped her eyes. That was cruel, but effective. She laughed again, softer this time, and something shifted. Not dramatically, just enough to matter. When the laughter faded, she studied him more closely. "So," she said, "your hobby, saying yes to life. Yes, that's not like a metaphor?" "No." She raised an eyebrow. "At all?" He shrugged. "If something comes up that I've never done before, and it's not actively harmful, I try to say yes, even if it terrifies me." Her smile slowed. "Why?" He considered the question, then answered simply. "I want to look back and know I tried. Not everything. Just enough. No speech. No sermon. No attempt to convert her. Just the truth." Lora felt the unfamiliar sensation of curiosity blooming where skepticism usually lived. She took a sip of her coffee, eyes still on him, and thought, against her better judgment, that this might not be a date she forgot after all. Chapter 2. Not a metaphor. Lora didn't leave the cafe buzzing so much as quietly rearranged. She walked the 3 blocks to her apartment with her hands tucked into her coat pockets, replaying moments without meaning to. The way Daniel had listened. The way he hadn't rushed to fill silence. The dictionary joke. which she found herself smiling about again. Alone, like an idiot waiting at a crosswalk. It had been one coffee, 90 minutes, maybe, no sparks flying, no dramatic glances, and yet, something about the date refused to flatten into a neat memory. She unlocked her door, kicked off her shoes, and stood in her living room without turning on the lights. Saying yes to life, she thought, still sounded like nonsense. Her phone buzzed before she could overanalyze it further. Daniel, I had fun today. Daniel, no pressure, but I'd like to see you again. She smiled, then frowned at herself for smiling. Lora, I had fun too. Lora, I'd like that. The reply came almost immediately. Daniel, great. Daniel, want to do something you've never done before? She stared at the screen. Lora, that depends. Lora, are we talking mild novelty or felony? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, reappeared. Daniel, mild novelty. Daniel, I don't say yes to prison. She laughed aloud, surprising herself again. Lora, okay, what did you have in mind? There was a pause this time, long enough that she set her phone down and began unpinning her hair. She was halfway to the bathroom when it buzzed again. Daniel, there's a beginner improv class tonight. Daniel, starts in 40 minutes. She stopped. Improv. Her stomach tightened reflexively, like it had heard a threat. Lora, absolutely not. Almost immediately, Daniel, that's fair. Daniel, want to know why I'm going anyway? She hesitated, then typed. Lora, you're going alone? Daniel, yep. Daniel, never done it before. She sat on the edge of her couch. Lora, and this is your hobby. Daniel, this is my hobby. She imagined him walking into a room full of strangers, raising his hand, saying yes to being ridiculous in public. The image was both horrifying and oddly compelling. Lora, you really mean it, don't you? Daniel, mean what? Lora, saying yes. Lora, it's not just a cute answer. Another pause. Then, Daniel, it's not a metaphor. Her heart did something inconvenient. Lora, I am not doing improv. Daniel, I didn't ask you to. She exhaled, relieved, and oddly disappointed. Daniel, I asked if you wanted to do something you've never done before. Daniel, we could also go somewhere new. Eat something strange. Daniel, or we could just get coffee again. She smiled at the last line. The lack of pressure. The space he left. Lora looked around her apartment. Familiar furniture. Familiar quiet. The safe predictability of a Friday night she'd already lived 100 times. She picked up her phone. Lora, I've never watched an improv class. Lora, I can sit in the back and judge silently. Daniel, that counts. Lora, I reserve the right to leave at any time. Daniel, of course. 20 minutes later, she was zipping her coat again, heart thudding with a mix of annoyance and anticipation. The improv studio was above a bakery, which felt like a cruel joke. The smell of sugar and yeast floated up the narrow staircase as Lora climbed. Following the sound of laughter she pretended not to hear. Daniel was waiting outside the door, hands in his pockets, rocking slightly on his heels. You came, he said, genuinely pleased. I said I would, she replied. This is already very unlike me. I'm honored, he said solemnly, then grinned. Ready? No. Perfect. Inside, folding chairs lined the walls. A dozen people milled about, stretching, chatting, looking far too comfortable with the idea of public failure. Lora immediately claimed a seat in the corner, crossing her arms like armor. Daniel, meanwhile, signed his name on a clipboard without hesitation. You're really doing this, she murmured. He glanced back at her. I told you. Why this? She asked. Why not? I don't know. Pottery. Rock climbing. Something quieter. He considered that as he joined the group forming a loose circle. Because this scares me more. That answer sat with her longer than she expected. The instructor clapped her hands. All right. First-timers. Welcome. Who's new? Daniel raised his hand. Lora felt a ridiculous surge of pride, immediately followed by alarm. The class began gently, warm-ups, name games, simple exercises. Daniel stumbled once, recovered, laughed at himself easily. He wasn't great. He wasn't terrible. He was present. At one point, he caught Lora watching him and made an exaggerated, silent face of mock panic. She bit her lip to keep from laughing. An hour later, the class ended in applause and exhausted smiles. Daniel emerged flushed, hair slightly mussed, eyes bright. Well? He asked, joining her. You survived, she said. I said yes, he corrected. They walked back down the stairs together, the bakery now closed, the street quiet. So, she said, do you just collect experiences? He shook his head. I don't collect them. I just don't avoid them. Why? He stopped walking, just for a moment. Because I spent a long time waiting to feel ready. And then I realized I might never feel that way. She nodded slowly. It wasn't dramatic. It was honest. They reached the corner where they'd part ways. I had fun, she said. Me too, he replied. Even before the public humiliation. She smiled. Especially before. As she walked home, Lora realized something unsettling and thrilling. She was already wondering what she might say yes to next. Chapter 3. The second yes Lora told herself she would say no. She stood in the produce aisle on Sunday morning, staring at avocados with the same intensity she usually reserved for performance reviews, phone buzzing in her coat pocket. She already knew what the message would say. Daniel had developed a knack for timing that felt intentional without being intrusive. Her phone buzzed again. She sighed, pulled it out. Daniel, I found something. Daniel, you don't have to say yes. Daniel, but I think you might want to. That, annoyingly, was exactly the right way to phrase it. Lora, you're dangerous with suspense. Daniel, occupational hazard. Daniel, there's a ferry that runs to a town I've never been to. Daniel, it leaves in an hour. She laughed under her breath. Lora, I have groceries. Daniel, I respect groceries. Lora, I also have plans. Daniel, I respect plans too. Daniel, I just don't always obey them. She picked up an avocado, tested it, put it back. Lora, what's in the town? There was a pause. Longer than usual. Daniel, I don't know. She leaned her cart against the display and closed her eyes for a moment. Normally, this was where she bowed out gracefully. Normally, she chose known quantities. Normally, she spent Sundays resetting her life so Monday felt manageable. But ever since the improv class, something had been quietly restless in her. Not dissatisfaction. Not unhappiness. More like a door she'd forgotten existed, now ajar. Lora, I'll meet you at the ferry terminal. Lora, if I hate it, I reserve the right to complain the entire time. Daniel, that's more than fair. Daniel, I'll bring snacks as a peace offering. When she hung up, Lora stared at her reflection in the freezer door. Who are you? She asked it softly. The ferry terminal was brighter than she expected. Sunlight bouncing off water that looked too blue to belong to a day she hadn't planned for. Daniel was easy to spot, leaning against a railing, paper bag at his feet, watching the boats like he was already somewhere else. You made it, he said, smiling. I am deeply out of character, she replied. He handed her a coffee without comment. The gesture landed somewhere between considerate and uncanny. They boarded with a small crowd, families, cyclists, a couple arguing quietly about directions. Lora leaned against the rail as the ferry pulled away, the city shrinking into something distant and oddly negotiable. So, she said, do you do this often? Just leave. He shook his head. Not often. Just sometimes. That's not reassuring. He smiled. I don't leave people. I leave routines. That felt like a distinction worth sitting with. The town was small in the way that suggested confidence rather than limitation. A main street, a bakery, a bookstore that appeared to have been resisting modernity out of spite. Daniel grinned like he'd won something invisible. They wandered without agenda. He didn't rush. She didn't check her phone. They shared pastries on a bench and watched a dog attempt, unsuccessfully, to steal a sandwich. You know, she said, brushing sugar from her fingers, I usually need at least 3 days' notice to do something like this. I'll keep that in mind, he said. Today was a gamble. And you're okay with that? Yes. She studied him. Do you ever get tired? He considered it. Sometimes. But not in the way I used to. Before, I was tired of thinking about things. Now I'm tired from doing them. They ended up in the bookstore, which smelled like dust and ink and defiance. Daniel ran his fingers along the spines, reverent without being precious. Favorite book? She teased. The dictionary, he said immediately. She groaned. You used that already. Still true. She laughed, then pulled a random paperback from the shelf. Pick a page. Any page. Any page. He did, then read the first sentence aloud. It was terrible, melodramatic, excessively sincere. They stared at each other. Well, she said, that's unfortunate. He smiled. Saying yes doesn't mean having good taste. They sat on the floor, backs against the shelves, trading bad sentences and laughing until a woman at the counter shushed them with a look that had seen things. When the ferry ride back came, Lora felt the faintest tug of disappointment. On deck, wind whipping her hair loose, she said quietly, you make it hard to stay the same. Daniel didn't answer immediately. I don't want to change you, he said finally. I just like meeting people where they are, and sometimes where they aren't yet. She nodded, grateful for the lack of expectation. As the city came back into view, Lora realized something with a mix of delight and alarm. She hadn't once checked the time. When they parted at the terminal, he didn't lean in, didn't linger, just smiled and said, thank you for saying yes. She watched him walk away, heart light, thoughts loud. At home that night, groceries forgotten, Lora made a list. Not of plans, not of goals, just things she'd never done. And for the first time, the list didn't feel like pressure. It felt like possibility. Chapter 4. The cost of always saying yes. The first time Daniel got hurt, Lora wasn't there. She found out because her phone lit up at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday with a photo she didn't immediately understand. It showed a forearm wrapped in gauze, a thumb raised cheerfully into frame. Daniel. Still have all my fingers. Daniel, arguably a success. Her stomach dropped. Lora, what happened? This time, the pause stretched longer than she liked. Daniel tried indoor rock climbing. Daniel, turns out gravity is very committed to its job. She sat up in bed, sheets tangling around her legs. Lora, are you okay? Daniel, I will be. Daniel, mild sprain. Very bruised ego. She stared at the screen, pulse ticking louder than the room. Lora, you went alone? Daniel, yeah. She typed Y, deleted it. Typed you're ridiculous, deleted that too. Lora, I don't like getting surprise injury updates. The reply came almost instantly. Daniel, that's fair. Daniel, I'm sorry. The apology landed cleanly. No defensiveness. No explanation wrapped in bravado. Still, Lora lay awake long after the phone went dark, her earlier fond amusement at his philosophy turning over into something sharper. She pictured him alone in a gym, straining for a hold, pushing past fear because fear was the point. She didn't know why that unsettled her so much. They saw each other 2 days later. Daniel's arm was still bandaged, his movements a touch more careful. He tried to downplay it with humor, but Lora noticed the way he favored one side when he reached for his coffee. You don't have to pretend it doesn't hurt, she said, watching him wince. I'm not pretending, he said. I'm reframing. She raised an eyebrow. You're very good at that. They walked through the park, the afternoon cool and bright. Lora kept her hands shoved into her coat pockets to resist the urge to fuss. So, she said finally, does this happen a lot? He glanced at her. What part? The injuries, the close calls, the aftermath. He thought about it. Sometimes. That's not comforting. I know. She stopped walking. He stopped too, turning fully toward her now, attention sharp and present in a way that told her he knew this mattered. I don't do reckless things just to prove something, he said carefully. I pay attention. I prepare. I don't say yes blindly. But you still get hurt. Yes. The simplicity of it frustrated her. And you're okay with that? She pressed. With the risk. I'm not okay with it, he said. I'm accepting of it. That sounds like semantics. It might be, he admitted. But it's the difference between fear making my choices and fear just coming along for the ride. Lora looked away, watching a dog chase leaves with wholehearted commitment. I spend a lot of time avoiding things that could go wrong, she said quietly. He didn't interrupt. I plan. I optimize. I reduce risk, she continued. It's not because I'm unhappy. It's because I don't want to lose what works. Daniel nodded. That makes sense. No, she said, surprised by the heat in her voice. It makes me predictable. He smiled faintly. Predictable isn't a flaw. It is when it turns into a cage. They stood there, the space between them filled with things neither of them had said before. That night they ended up at her apartment. Not planned. Not dramatic. Just the natural result of not wanting the conversation to end yet. They cooked pasta together, bumping elbows in her too small kitchen. Daniel insisted on chopping vegetables one-handed, which she vetoed firmly. I can help, he protested. You can supervise, she corrected, handing him a glass of wine. They ate at her small table, knees brushing. Conversation drifted, comfortable but edged with something new, an awareness of closeness that wasn't just physical. When he kissed her, it was slow and unassuming. No urgency, no claiming, just a question asked with lips and answered when she leaned in. Afterward, they lay tangled on her couch, lights low, the city murmuring outside. Daniel traced idle patterns on her arm with his good hand. This, he said softly, is something I've never done before. She tilted her head. Being on my couch? Being with someone who notices when I'm hurt, he said. Who worries? Her chest tightened. That's a low bar, she murmured. It's not, he replied. It's rare. She swallowed. Do you ever worry that one day you'll say yes to something that costs you more than you expected? He didn't answer immediately. She felt his fingers still. Yes, he said finally. I think about that. And I worry that saying no to everything already did. Lora closed her eyes. The weeks that followed were good. Not explosive. Not idyllic. Just good in a way that felt earned. They saw each other often, but not obsessively. Dates ranged from deliberately ordinary, grocery shopping together, folding laundry side by side, to gently strange. One evening, Daniel showed up at her door with a flyer. Glass-blowing workshop, he said. One night only. She stared at it. You're trying to set me on fire. Only metaphorically. She went. Another time, she dragged him to a lecture on urban development trends that he listened to with genuine interest, asking questions that surprised her. You don't have to say yes to everything, she told him afterward. I didn't, he said. I wanted to. That distinction mattered. The moment it tipped came quietly. They were crossing the street when Daniel slowed suddenly, eyes fixed on something ahead. A man stood on the corner, holding a sign and a violin case, music drifting thinly into traffic noise. I've never buskied, Daniel said. Lora felt it immediately, that tightening, that sense of the ground shifting. Daniel, she said. No. He looked at her, surprised. Why not? Because you don't play the violin, she said. Because you're injured. Because it's crowded. Because it scares me? He offered gently. Yes, she said, sharper than she meant to be. Because it scares me. He studied her face, really looking this time. I wasn't asking for permission, he said quietly. I was sharing a thought. And I'm sharing a boundary. Something passed between them. Not anger. Not resentment. Awareness. He nodded. Okay. They walked on, the music fading behind them. Lora felt relief and something else she didn't like naming. That night, alone in her apartment, she realized the truth she'd been circling. Daniel's yes weren't just about experiences. They were about distance. Motion made it easier not to stay too long in one place. Not to risk needing something steady. And Lora, careful, deliberate Lora, was starting to want exactly that. The cost of always saying yes, she understood now, wasn't the bruises. It was the possibility that one day he wouldn't know how to say stay. Chapter 5. The one thing he hasn't tried. The realization settled into Lora slowly, like a bruise that only showed itself the next morning. It wasn't dramatic. There was no argument, no slam door, no decisive moment she could point to and say there. That's when it changed. It arrived instead in fragments. Daniel declining to leave a jacket at her place because he never knew where he'd be next. Daniel talking about future plans with an open-ended sometime. Daniel always moving forward, even when forward wasn't necessary. He stayed over often. He remembered how she took her tea. He texted when he said he would. He was kind in ways that mattered. And yet, there was always the sense that he was packed already. They were sitting on her floor one evening, backs against the couch, sharing takeout containers balanced between them. Rain streaked the windows, blurring the city into something abstract and forgiving. Lora nudged his foot with hers. Do you ever get tired of new? Daniel smiled faintly. Sometimes. That wasn't a yes or no question, she said. He laughed. I know. She watched him chew thoughtfully, then asked, what's the longest you've stayed in one place? He swallowed. Physically or otherwise? Either. He leaned his head back against the couch. 3 years. Same apartment. Same job. And I got very good at imagining what else I could be doing. That sounds lonely. It was, he admitted. And safe. She turned toward him. Those don't usually go together. They did for me, he said. I knew exactly what my life looked like, who I was, what came next. And why did you leave? He didn't answer right away. The rain filled the space. Because I realized I was using stability as a way to avoid risk, he said finally. And one day I woke up and thought, if this is all there is, I want to know sooner rather than later. Lora nodded. She understood that instinct more than she wanted to. Later that night, as they lay in bed, she traced a slow line along his shoulder. You know, she said lightly, for someone who says yes to everything, you're surprisingly careful about some things. Like what? Like us. He shifted slightly, propping himself on an elbow to look at her. Careful how? She hesitated. This was the edge, the place where humor usually saved her. She chose not to use it. You don't talk about the future, she said. Not in a way that includes staying. His expression softened, but something closed behind his eyes. I don't make promises I'm not sure I can keep, he said. That's reasonable, she replied. But it's also convenient. He studied her face. What are you asking me, Lora? The question landed heavier than she expected. I'm not asking you to stop saying yes, she said. I'm asking if you've ever said yes to this, to staying when it gets ordinary, to choosing one thing. He exhaled slowly. I don't know if I'm good at that. She nodded, a quiet ache settling in her chest. That's what I thought. They didn't fight. They never really did. But something shifted that night. A new awareness, fragile and unresolved. Over the next week, Daniel became gentler, more present. He cooked dinner at her place twice. He brought groceries without asking. He stayed later, left slower. Felt like an offering. And it scared her. They went on fewer novelty dates and more real ones. Errands, long walks, sitting on opposite ends of the couch reading separate things. Lora liked this version. Felt earned. Lived in. One afternoon, she found him standing in her doorway, staring at her bookshelves. You organize by genre and then by author, he observed. Yes, she said, like a civilized person. He smiled. I like it here. Her heart stumbled. Here, she echoed carefully. With you, he clarified. In this space. She waited. He didn't say more. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay awake listening to his breathing, steady and untroubled, and understood with painful clarity what he hadn't tried yet. Daniel had said yes to fear, yes to discomfort, yes to change. But he hadn't said yes to being needed. He hadn't said yes to the quiet risk of choosing one life and letting all the others go. The next morning, over coffee, she said it. You've never tried staying, she said. Not accusatory, just honest. He looked up sharply. That's not fair. It is, she replied. You stay places. You stay overnight. You don't stay when staying means deciding. He set his mug down. I'm deciding all the time. You're choosing experiences, she said, not commitments. Silence stretched. I don't want to cage myself again, he said. And I don't want to be something you pass through, she said softly. The words hung between them, fragile and undeniable. I care about you, he said. I know, she replied. That's the problem. He reached for her hand, and she let him, though her chest ached. I don't know how to promise permanence, he said. But I know I want this. Right now. She squeezed his fingers gently. Right now isn't the part I'm afraid of. They didn't break up. They didn't make up either. They existed in a careful in-between for a while, both aware that the thing they were avoiding had a shape now and a name. Staying. One evening, as they walked home from dinner, Daniel stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. I was offered a short-term project, he said. 3 months. Different city. Laura's heart sank, though she'd known this moment was coming. And? She asked. And I said I'd think about it. She searched his face. You've never said that before. No, he agreed. I usually just say yes. She nodded, strangely calm. Whatever you choose, she said. I need you to choose it fully. He met her gaze, something like fear flickering there. Not of the unknown, but of the known. That night, after he left, Lora sat alone on her couch and let the truth settle. Loving Daniel wasn't risky because he leapt. It was risky because one day he might not. And if he did, she needed to know he'd learned how to stay. Not because he was afraid to leave, but because he finally wanted to. For the first time since meeting him, Lora understood something about herself too. She wasn't afraid of change. She was afraid of being the only one brave enough to ask for permanence. And she wasn't sure how much longer she could live in a maybe. Chapter 6. Laura's no. Daniel didn't take the project. Not right away. He told Lora on a Wednesday night, standing in her kitchen with his hands wrapped around a mug he wasn't drinking from. I asked for more time, he said. They can wait a week. She nodded, though something in her chest tightened instead of loosening. That's new, she said. It is, he agreed. I'm trying not to react automatically. The word trying landed harder than he meant it to. They stood there, the kitchen light too bright, the moment too quiet. Lora noticed small details with unwanted clarity. The faint bruise still yellowing at his wrist. The way he'd started leaving his shoes by the door like he belonged there. The grocery list on the fridge written in both their handwriting. She realized, with a clarity that felt almost cruel, that the problem wasn't whether he took the project. It was that everything felt temporary until proven otherwise. They sat on the couch, knees angled toward each other but not touching. What happens after the week? She asked. I decide, he said. Fully. And if you say yes? He didn't hesitate. Then I go. And if you say no? Then I stay, he said, then added quickly. At least here. For now. There it was again. For now. Lora leaned back, staring at the ceiling. You know what scares me? She said. He waited. It's not that you might leave, she continued. It's that if you stay, I'll always wonder when you're going to get restless. When I'll start to feel like the thing holding you back instead of the thing you chose. Daniel sat forward, elbows on his knees. I don't see you that way. I know, she said. But I don't think you see it yet either. He rubbed his hands together slowly, like he was warming them over a fire only he could feel. I don't want to lose you, he said. Her throat tightened. I don't want to lose myself trying to keep you. They looked at each other then, really looked. No humor, no deflection. Just two people standing at the edge of something they both wanted but didn't know how to hold. I think, Lora said carefully, that we're asking each other for things we don't know how to give yet. Daniel swallowed. Are you saying? I'm saying no, she said. The word surprised them both with its steadiness. No, she repeated softer. Not forever. Not dramatically. Just no to this version of us. No to the waiting. No to hoping you'll wake up one day and want what I want. Silence filled the room. Heavy but not hostile. I don't want to resent you, she said. And I can feel it starting. That's on me to stop. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, then nodded. I respect that, he said. His voice was quiet, controlled. I don't like it, but I respect it. That more than anything nearly broke her. They didn't cry. They didn't raise their voices. They packed the moment carefully, like something fragile that still deserved care. Daniel gathered the things he'd left behind over the weeks. A book, a spare charger, the sweater he'd forgotten once and never reclaimed. Lora handed them to him one by one, hand steady, heart not. At the door, he hesitated. You changed something in me, he said. I don't know what it is yet, but I know it's there. She nodded. You did the same. He smiled sadly. I wish timing were a skill. Me too. He leaned in, kissed her forehead. An ending, not a question, and left. The apartment felt louder after the door closed. Too empty. Too still. The first week without Daniel was the hardest. Lora kept expecting her phone to buzz with something spontaneous. An invitation. Possibility. She missed the way he made the world feel wider, even as she knew she couldn't live permanently in that widening. She filled her time methodically. Work, friends, gym, Dinners that ended at reasonable hours. Everyone told her she'd done the right thing. She believed them, mostly. The second week was quieter. Not easier, but calmer. The ache dulled into something she could carry without it changing her posture. She noticed changes in herself too. She said yes to a coworker's last-minute happy hour and didn't hate it. She signed up for a pottery class and ruined 3 bowls with enthusiasm. She went to a movie alone and didn't check her phone once. She wasn't becoming Daniel. She was becoming braver in her own way. They didn't talk. That was the hardest rule she enforced. No check-ins. No casual updates. No pretending they could slide back into comfort without consequence. Then, 3 weeks after they parted, her phone buzzed. Daniel, hi. Daniel. I hope this isn't unwelcome. She stared at the message for a long moment before replying. Lora, hi. Lora, it's okay. Another pause. Longer this time. Daniel, I didn't take the project. Her heart jumped, then steadied. Lora, okay. Daniel, I realized I was waiting for it to feel less scary. Daniel, and that's not why I say yes. She closed her eyes. Lora, why didn't you say yes? Daniel, because this time, leaving scared me more. She didn't reply immediately. Lora, I'm glad you figured that out. Lora, truly. Daniel, I'm not asking for anything. Daniel, I just wanted you to know. She set the phone down, breathing through the mix of relief and sadness and something like hope she wasn't ready to trust. Later that night, she wrote in her notebook, the one that had replaced the list of things she'd never done. No isn't the opposite of yes, she wrote. It's the thing that makes yes mean something. She didn't know if she and Daniel would find their way back to each other. She didn't know if he'd learned how to stay, or if she'd learned how to leap. What she did know was this. For the first time in a long time, she hadn't said no out of fear. She'd said it out of self-respect. And that, she suspected, was its own kind of courage. Chapter 7. Relearning yes, Lora ran into Daniel at a place neither of them could pretend was accidental. The farmer's market was loud with Saturday confidence. Dogs on leashes they didn't respect, children sticky with fruit, couples debating bread like it mattered deeply. Lora had come alone, headphones in, determined to enjoy the small victory of liking her own company. She was examining tomatoes when she heard his laugh. Not close, not directed at her, still unmistakable. Her first instinct was to leave, not out of panic, out of self-preservation. She had learned, painfully and carefully, how to keep her equilibrium. She didn't want to knock it loose on a whim. Then she turned, because she always had been curious to her own detriment. Daniel stood a few stalls down, talking to an older woman with silver braids and a voice loud enough to carry. He held a bundle of carrots like they were evidence in a trial, nodding solemnly at something she just said. He looked different, not dramatic, just quieter, more anchored. His posture lacked the restless tilt she'd grown used to, the subtle readiness to move on. She watched him thank the woman and step aside, only then noticing Lora. Their eyes met. For a split second, neither of them moved. Then he smiled, not bright, not automatic. Real, careful, like he understood exactly what this moment cost. Hi, he said, approaching slowly, as if sudden movements might spook her. Hi, she replied. They stood there, the market flowing around them, two people momentarily out of step with the world's rhythm. You look well, he said. So do you. Which was true. He did. There was a steadiness to him she hadn't seen before, as if he'd finally stopped bracing against stillness. I didn't know you came here, she added. I didn't, he said. Until recently. She smiled faintly. Of course. They walked together without explicitly deciding to, drifting toward the edge of the market where it was quieter. The conversation stayed light at first, neutral ground. How's the pottery class? He asked. She blinked. How did you know about that? You left clay under your fingernails the last time I saw you, he said. I guessed. She laughed. I'm terrible at it. That's not a reason to stop. She gave him a look. Careful. He raised his hands. Observation only. No philosophy attached. They reached a bench and sat, leaving a polite but noticeable space between them. I'm not here to ask for anything, Daniel said, after a moment. I just wanted to say hello, and that I'm glad you look like yourself. She studied him. I am myself. I know, he said. I just mean you don't look like you've shrunk. Something warm and unexpected loosened in her chest. What about you? She asked. Are you still saying yes to everything? He shook his head. No. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. I've been learning to say yes differently, he continued, and sometimes to say no. Turns out that's harder. She waited. I said no to 3 things this week, he said. A last-minute trip. A job that would have looked good but felt wrong. A date I realized I wasn't actually interested in. Lora absorbed that quietly. And how does that feel? She asked. Terrifying, he admitted. Also relieving. She nodded. Welcome to the club. They sat in companionable silence, watching a child drop an apple and cry as if betrayed by gravity itself. I miss you, Daniel said suddenly. The words were simple, unadorned, not a hook. Lora didn't flinch. I miss you too, she said. Because lying would cheapen everything they'd done to get here. He turned to her. I don't want to be a man you have to convince to stay. Her breath caught. I don't want to be someone who confuses movement with meaning, he went on. Or novelty with courage. I thought saying yes was about bravery. I'm starting to think sometimes bravery looks like standing still when it would be easier to leave. She searched his face for the familiar signs. Evasion, urgency, the itch for the next thing. She didn't see them. What do you want? She asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. I want to choose, he said. Not collect, not escape. Choose. And I want to do it slowly enough that it's real. Her chest ached, not painfully, but with the weight of being seen. And you? He asked. What do you want now? She took a breath. I want someone who knows that stability isn't a cage, she said. It's a commitment you make every day. Not because it's easy, but because it's worth the effort. He nodded. I'm learning that. They stood together as the market began to thin, the noise softening into background texture. I'm not ready to go back to where we were, Lora said. I wouldn't want that, Daniel replied. I think that version of us did what it needed to. She smiled. So what are we doing? He hesitated, just long enough to show he was choosing his words, not avoiding them. We're starting with coffee, he said. On purpose. Planned. No surprises. She laughed. That might be the bravest thing you've ever suggested. Don't spread that around, he said. It could ruin my reputation. They exchanged numbers again, deliberately this time, like a small ritual made sacred by intention. As they parted, Daniel paused. For what it's worth, he said. Thank you for saying no when you did. It forced me to figure out what yes actually means. She nodded. And thank you for not turning my no into a challenge. He smiled. It wasn't a door. It was a lesson. Walking home, Lora felt something unfamiliar settle into place. Not excitement. Not anxiety. Trust slow, cautious, earned. She didn't know where this would lead. She didn't need to. For now, it was enough to know that when they said yes again, it would be with their eyes open. And when they stood still together, it wouldn't feel like stopping. It would feel like arriving. Chapter 8. A different kind of yes. They started with coffee. On purpose. Tuesday evening. Same cafe as the first date, which Lora noticed only when she arrived and felt the faintest echo of her former self tug at her sleeve. Daniel was already there, sitting at a small table instead of standing by the counter this time, hands wrapped around his cup like he was anchoring himself. He stood when he saw her, not reflexively, intentionally. Hi, he said. Hi, she replied. They smiled, and it was different now, less spark, more warmth, like embers instead of flame. They talked about ordinary things, work deadlines, her pottery class, which now had a mug that leaned slightly to the left but held liquid successfully. His recent decision to renew his apartment lease instead of subletting it, just in case. I didn't know that counted as bravery, he said. It does, she replied. It's very unromantic bravery. The best kind. He laughed, then grew thoughtful. I've been thinking a lot, he said, about what I thought I was afraid of. And? She asked. I thought I was afraid of getting stuck, he said. But I think I was actually afraid of wanting something enough that losing it would hurt. Lora felt that land somewhere deep and quiet. They finished their coffee without rushing. When they left, it was raining lightly, the kind that didn't demand umbrellas. They walked side by side, not touching, both aware of the choice not to. Do you want to walk a bit? He asked. Yes, she said, and meant all of it. They walked through streets softened by rain, reflections stretching the city into something gentler. At a corner, Daniel slowed, then stopped. I want to say something, he said, and I want to say it carefully. She turned to face him. Okay. I'm not asking you to jump, he said, and I'm not promising I've figured everything out, but I am asking if we can try again without the running, without the waiting for the next thing. Her heart beat steadily, not wildly, not fearfully. What does trying look like? She asked. Showing up, he said, making plans and keeping them, talking about the future without treating it like a threat, letting stillness be part of the adventure. She smiled softly. You know stillness doesn't mean stagnation. I do now, he said, because I finally stayed long enough to feel the difference. She took his hand then. The gesture felt ceremonial, like crossing a threshold. I can't promise certainty, she said. I can promise intention. I'll take that, he replied. I'm very done with improvising my personal life. She laughed. Careful. That almost sounds like growth. Don't rush me, he said, smiling. They walked the rest of the way like that, hands linked, steps matched. Weeks passed. Slowly, deliberately, they built something quiet and real. Dinner nights that repeated without apology. Shared shelves. A calendar that held plans further than a week out. Daniel didn't stop saying yes, but his yes changed shape. Yes to helping her move a couch instead of attending a pop-up event. Yes to a Sunday spent doing nothing productive at all. Yes to imagining a future that didn't need an exit strategy. One evening, months later, they sat on Laura's balcony watching the city settle into night. I have a question, Daniel said. She smiled. You always do. Do you remember my hobby? He asked. She laughed. Saying yes to life? Hard to forget. He nodded. I think I misunderstood it at first. Oh, I thought it meant chasing experience, he said. But I think it actually means choosing meaning, even when it's quiet, even when it's repetitive. She leaned her head on his shoulder. That sounds suspiciously like commitment. He kissed the top of her head. I'm saying yes to it. She closed her eyes, warmth spreading through her chest. At the end of her life, Lora thought, she wouldn't remember every brave thing she'd done. She would remember the moment she learned that courage didn't always look like leaping into the unknown. Sometimes it looked like staying, and saying yes fully finally to one life, one love, one ordinary, extraordinary choice at a time.